Hi, everybody. It's Jen Barnhill with Partners in Promise, and I'm really excited to have an EFMP story today. And it doesn't necessarily look the normal format because normally you see me here talking with stereotypically a female and someone who is not related to me. But today I have my brother because I'm telling my story. He is clearly not in the military. You can see by the lovely COVID hair that he is not military connected. But what I really wanted to talk about today was the adult perspective on the special education and learning disability journey. And my brother is opening his history to us today, and we're really just thankful. I'm thankful for him to be able to talk with us about that experience and mine as well as a sibling of somebody who has different learning needs. So thanks, Rich. Can you quickly introduce yourself, where you are, what's going on in COVID world, just a little bit of a background of who you are. Besides my brother and being from New Jersey. So we all talk. We're going to talk over each other quite a bit.
Yeah, it's Rich O'Reilly. I currently live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I went to Appalachian State down here in North Carolina. I have been living here for 7 years. I work as a sales professional in cybersecurity. Been doing that for the last 5 years. Before that, I got my teacher's certificate in North Carolina through NC Teach, and I taught in Beijing. Just a little background on me, education-wise, life history-wise, where I'm at. Currently in my house with my COVID hair, as Jen said previously, and I have my little dog Frank behind us. He's a dog, and he's just chilling there. So if you hear any barking or any noise, it might be him or our two dogs downstairs. I live with my girlfriend Sam. She's downstairs with our two terrier mixes. So they're a little bigger, little louder. So I wanted to keep them out of the way.
So are my kids. They're if they happen to see this video with their uncle, there might be some editing required for this video. But anyway, we're gonna kind of jump in. So just obviously quickly, the reason we're having these videos is to kind of share our experiences with just education, and especially when it comes to special education. Can you tell our audience a little bit about your background in your education as a child?
Absolutely. So I was diagnosed with learning disability in first grade. It is a visual, motor, perceptual impairment, which means that I have issues with looking at a piece of paper or a screen or a chalkboard back, when those were a thing, and then transcribing what I see down through my hand. So my penmanship is very poor. My ability to spell is dyslexic, to say the least. I still have these issues. I went through special education from first grade through senior year of high school. I also have ADD and ADHD. Was prescribed Ritalin in first grade as well. I was in what they call a resource room, which basically means that I was in the general education, and then for language arts, I would be removed from the classroom and I would go off to a separate class called the resource room, which is special education now. I don't know what the proper nomenclature is, but whatever it is, that's where I was moved to. And I would be there for English, pretty much for almost all of my education. I did go what they used to call it mainstream. I don't know what they call it now.
You can use whatever terminology you grew up with, because that's what you were. Well, because I think it also impacts, your perception of special education today, because that's what you were. It also impacts you as an individual, because that's the words that were used to describe what you went through. So there is no wrong. Just tell it like it was, really.
It was not as much fun as I'm maybe making it sound. I entered mainstream classrooms towards the end of my high school career, but I was still taking use of some of the additional time, additional testing. So I had an IEP for most of my education, and that gave me additional time on tests, which is ridiculous because if anyone knows me, I'm literally the fastest test taker you'll ever imagine.
So it wasn't necessarily in line with what would have helped you achieve a goal, really.
No, it was very different. I mean, there was people that were professionals. We were in a very good school district. Jen, maybe have said this in previous videos. We came from a more affluent neighborhood and really good school district, one of the top performing school districts in the country. That was very, very competitive. So, basically I had an IEP. I was actually at a greater advantage than most children that have a similar issue than me, because we had a lot of like benefits. So there were a lot of people helping us out. I would go through and be assessed every year for cognitive function and basically how I'm doing. Um, During this time, our parent, me and Jen, our parents went through divorce. My first year of school, so kindergarten. I actually didn't go to my first day of kindergarten because my parents got in a big fight the night before. So it's kind of
I
a
didn't even
different.
know that. I didn't know that was the night
Yeah,
before.
that was the big fight was the night before first day of kindergarten. I did not go to kindergarten the first day of kindergarten, so education was kind of a different setup. But we went in and I got my IEP, and it gave me a lot of different kind of help. But this was the mid '90s, and honestly, IEPs were not standard, and special education was not seen as it wasn't as represented in the total population. So there was, in my entire grade, there was 5 of us that had IEPs and were considered learning disabled. Now that I've learned more and going through the education that I've been through, I realize that that's actually much more prevalent and much more accepted, and they have a lot more schema and help and support and understanding and in classroom teaching, which there was barely any of it. So the real help that I was able to get was getting copies of notes, which happened very infrequently. I would say maybe 1 out of 100 gave me actually copies of notes so that I didn't have to sit there and doodle and lose focus and stop paying attention because I couldn't keep up and then fall behind and just have to listen. So that's just kind of a long way of explaining a little bit of
No.
my educational background. I did poorly throughout school for most of it. For middle school, I did fairly well, but once adolescence hit and puberty hit, I just kind of went right off the rails, and I did okay to bad in middle school, and I did poor in high school. I could blame it on learning disability, but honestly, a lot of it was I didn't respect school. I didn't like it. I didn't want to have to spend more time doing it. And I kind of just I tuned out and stopped paying attention. So I ended up graduating at the bottom of my high school class, and I went to community college. And in community college, I was there for 1 semester and I dropped out and said, I didn't want to do this. School is stupid. I worked for 1 year, realized I had to go to school, went back and had a really, really good teacher in psychology at a community college in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, that taught me about different educational strategies and different learning abilities. Then I actually went and took a step back, looked at how I learn, and that was kind of the changing point. And from there till my graduation from Appalachian State, I ended up with, I believe it was I ended up with a 3.6 total GPA, and that includes my 1.2 from community college the first semester, which I did very poorly. And then my time at App State. So, went from being a 1.9 graduating in high school. I was 199 out of 220. So, bottom 10%. And ended up graduating cum laude from Appalachian State with a pre-law degree. And yeah, didn't do much
Well,
with 2010. Not a
I
good
mean,
time.
I will just say, as your sister, and you are, it's the stereotype of what we think of. You're a very intelligent person who didn't learn in the traditional way. That wasn't your thing, and it didn't help. A lot of things that I contributed to some of the negative feelings of education. I was a kid too, and so one of the things and purposes of this conversation and the conversations that we're having with our community here is to find I don't want to say silver lining, but to take away lessons from things that are difficult. And so essentially, as I'll take ownership. I was not helpful. I made fun of you. Other kids made fun of you in that environment. We are way more PC, so to speak, nowadays, but it's really a point for us that we're working through still. But, what was that experience like being one of the first kids who've kind of gone through this process, and then also being in an environment where there are a lot of really smart people around you and feeling like made to feel inferior?
So it wasn't, obviously it wasn't great. I mean, there was tough times. But I mean, at the end of the day, I would have to say that it it made me a lot more resilient, and made me so. It's kind of crazy. You'd think like, oh yeah, that sucks. Like, and it did. It was not fun, and I'm getting like even emotional talking about it because I don't spend much time thinking about it anymore. But what it gave me is grit. So I am not afraid of failure. I've failed before. I know dozens of people who went straight through all of their schools and they had their overinflated grades like they have now. Your grades are inflated. They're not real. Just kidding. You can edit that out. But it's true. Like there's a feeling about everyone's exceptional. Everyone's going to do well. Well, that's not the world. The world has failures. The world has difficulties. The world has issues. And you're going to run up against them and they're going to hit you and it's going to not be great. But how are you going to respond? You know what I mean? Do you
Yeah.
roll over and die, or do you keep fighting? So they were not fun. And Jen is, so to give you, I don't know how much she gave you, but I'll give you a little insight on her. Jen was one of the most exceptional students in her grade. Jen is a very smart woman. She speaks 3 languages, I believe. Not fluently anymore, but there was Italian, French, and Japanese. She speaks with a high level. She was a diligent hard worker. She worked most days. She did all of her homework, never missed. She would always be focused, and she was a shining star. I remember multiple times I'd enter a classroom and they would say, "Oh, you're Jen O'Reilly's little brother? Oh, great." And then they would meet me, and I was a troublesome bad kid who got detention in kindergarten. So it was just a very juxtaposition compared to Jen. So it was really kind of I was following a really good, hardworking student that did it through the right way. There are a lot of kids that are smart, and there are a lot of kids that can work hard. There's not a lot of smart, hardworking kids, and that's really kind of where Jen fit. So she developed things differently than I did. She had to work a little harder than I did to learn things, but she did it. You know what I mean? So when I would come in and not do my homework, it was kind of a change from the teacher's perspective. So it was tough following Jen, and it was tough being in the resource room. I'll tell you, like I remember flatly there was a kid who I was in 4th grade. I was leaving the classroom. It was my time to leave. And one of the kids said, "Oh, go learning your ABCs," or some sort of, it was a very bad joke. First thing, it wasn't funny, which is the real crime here. And second thing, it was just a cheap, kind of stupid joke. And I didn't like it. And it was a substitute teacher. And the substitute teacher was actually our neighbor across the street growing up, Mrs. Gertler. So I walk up to the kid's desk. I take his desk, I flip it on top of him, and I stand over him and I go, "What are you going to do? How are you going to handle this? Like, are you going to go? Like, are we going to have fun, or are you just going to talk?" And I get sent to the hallway, and she looks at me and she goes, "That little punk had it coming." And I scratched.
You're trying to, as a little kid, you're trying to find your place in the world. And for you were a very smart kid who had, difficulties learning the way that the average student would learn. But, the your place, as your sister looking at watching you go through those things, your place was secured as like the tough kid, and that no one's going to mess with the tough kid, but that isn't who you are as a person, as an adult. I mean, of course, yes, it has shaped who you are, but getting to know you as an adult, there's a lot of parts of your personality that I think that you're funny. That's part of our personalities. We're chatty Irish family, so we can't shake that. That's who we are. We bring us a movie quote and we'll be able to tell you where it's from. There's a lot. We're sharp. However, there's some parts of our personality that have been, and especially yours, that are created around this protecting yourself from this experience that you said, you crystallized experience. And I think that that's not unusual for kids. they create another personality to try to cover up the hurt that happens. And of course, like, I was a contributing factor, not just by doing it in a different way than you, but also, kids were not discouraged as much as they're discouraged now from, making fun of kids for their learning disabilities. And I hope that that's not the experience of children nowadays. But I, personally, I feel ashamed about it, looking back. But also, that's why we're here today, is to try to heal some of that, but also to learn from it. And for parents who are dealing with not only helping their children who have IEPs, who need to find a connection so that they can learn, but also siblings who are jealous of the attention that they might be getting. Because to me, on my side of the coin, I was doing the right thing. I was doing it the right way. I was getting the A's. And, our parents, like you said, were divorced. So they tried their best. They were doing their best, as all parents do. They're, you don't know what you're doing, as parents. You think that you do, but you don't. And so how you balance giving attention to that child who needs attention to help to find success, versus a child who is doing well and doesn't necessarily need that maintenance, so to speak. Our parents tried, but for parents, what would you say could have been an approach that might have been a little bit different? What would you, looking back now, think would have been a little? And we're not trying to, Mom, Dad, if you're watching this, we're not trying to like call you out. We're just trying to understand for others, how can we learn from this?
So great question. And first thing pops in my mind is, if you have a kid that has that's differently abled and has different skills, what I would recommend is, instead of trying to lift where their skills aren't that strong, focus on what they are strong at. What I would recommend is, instead of trying to dampen the energy of the kid, it's kind of like a really energetic dog. If you don't give your energetic dog a task, it's going to find something to do. So the idea is to have clear tasks with clear success and clear goals. And I think a lot of people are, when they think about a child who has a learning disability and has ADHD, they only think about the conduct and they only think about the mind. And they think about, how can we handle this? Can we go to a medical, intervention? Which, by the way, I'm an adult. I take Adderall now. It helps me like you've never believed. I like to describe it as, I was walking through a hallway where the walls came in and would just pull me in one direction or the other. And now I get to just walk through the center of the hallway and I get to choose where my energy goes. Mm-hmm. But I would really recommend creating, like, when I say activities, like something that is difficult and rewarding.
As a sibling who did their homework. So this is one of the things that I've learned now as an adult, as doing these interviews, really, to be honest, hearing people talk about executive functioning and how the step-by-step things that come naturally to me, but don't come naturally to you. And to me, it's like, when I was a child, I would think, well, why doesn't he just do it this way? And for parents trying to explain to their other children who are also, they're children, it's hard for them to understand. So if you were to like go back and talk to Jenny O, how would you describe what going to a class or doing homework felt like to you? And obviously you're looking back as an adult, but how would you describe that to a child? Like, how would you describe, the hallway is a good example, but how could we simplify to explain to siblings who are frustrated that mom and dad are giving all the attention?
Here's how I like to think of it. We're all kind of going on a path, right? But no one starts at the same time, because no one's born the same day. They put people into classes based on roughly the year you were born and roughly the area that you live in. And that's really the only criteria to get you in there. But every single person in every single class and every single person that you ever meet, they're all at a different starting point. They're all at a different place. They're all looking at the world in a different perspective. So you were ahead, but they're not trying to ignore you for someone else. Really, they're just trying to bring me back to where you're at. And the best way that you could kind of work around that would be to try to be understanding, but it's impossible. You're young, you're a child, and it's an unfair thing to have for you to ask to be the adult here. But I would really, to all the children out there who have, a differently, a sibling who is either learning disabled or hyperactive or whatever, the best thing you can do is just try to be compassionate, because happiness isn't a destination, it's how you approach life.
Yeah.
And that's
And
really all we're going for. Like, if you want like straight A's, I'll tell you, there's no, Ted Kaczynski was a straight A student who had a 1600 on his SATs and went to Harvard, did exceptionally well, went and taught at Brown. Then you have people who, went to college for 1 year and dropped out, founded Apple, and changed the world.
just so you know, for those who don't know who Ted Kaczynski is, can you enlighten us, please?
Ted Kaczynski is the Unabomber. He was
Like, Howard, how did we go here? How did we get to the Unabomber? I know.
Academically is one dimension of life.
If I were to go back and tell myself, like how to look at your experience, I would say that not all brains work the same. The way that you, little Jen, process an assignment isn't the way that your brain processes. And that was hard for me to understand, is that, as a child, it's really difficult to understand that the brain doesn't work the same from person to person. And even as an adult, I have a hard time understanding and not getting frustrated with people who don't necessarily think in the same manner that I do. The step one of a thought process, and step two and step three, and the things that come logically to me do not come logically to others. And that's okay. It's just, it takes people different phases of life to understand that is, don't expect people to come at a problem the same way that you do. And I think that would have been something that would have been helpful for me to be able to be a more compassionate, like you were saying, compassionate sibling. And so as far as, looking back now, of course, you're doing well in your job, and you're, rocking it and with the dogs and being an awesome uncle and all those things, and good stuff is happening for you. But, obviously that wasn't always the case. And I wondered, what do you think the role of like that early experience with education played, if any?
So the role of education was kind of adversarial to me. So I never saw, like, I think the big thing between you and me was we prioritize things differently. I never prioritized making my teachers happy. That was never something I cared about. It was always them versus me, as opposed to them with me. So I never saw, like, I would do all the projects the night before because I didn't care. Like, I always prioritized my play over whatever they wanted to teach me, because of how I think it was laid out educationally, which was, they give me an assignment, I don't see the purpose in it, I don't think it's meaningful, I don't do it. And that was kind of my beginning, whereas you did it in more of a correct fashion, which is you saw the teacher's assignment as, okay, well, this is going to build me towards something else, and this is me practicing so that later on I'd be okay. I had a cognitive disconnect between, you build your skills and then you become good. Now, that I had obviously different than other people, how, like, I was good at things without really ever trying. As in, like, I could just, like, if I wasn't immediately great at something, I didn't do it. So when I played sports, I was always starter immediately. Like, if I the first time I go out on a field, I would start, and I did for most sports. But I didn't for baseball. I hated baseball, never did it. As soon as I was able to quit baseball, I quit baseball. Soccer, I played every, center mid for as long as I wanted to play on any team I wanted to be on. I would start. No matter who's on the team, I'd win. Football, same thing. It really was, I didn't appreciate the process, which I think a lot of education is the process. The problem is teachers and students and people get bogged down in trying to secure funding for themselves, for their school district, based on a standardized test, based on going through let's bring these grades to here, and we have to learn, and this is what we have to do, and we have to get this done, as opposed to, hey, let's build some skills so that students are prepared when life's challenges come at them to be able to handle them in an appropriate way. Use your IEP, do what you can, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is realizing what education really is. What education really is building the building blocks for how you're going to solve problems in the future. And that's it. So, if a kid's not doing great in third grade, look at what they're doing wrong. Look at why they're doing wrong, not that they're doing wrong.
I just, is there anything else you want to share? I know we covered quite a bit, and I personally, I'm so thankful that you're willing to talk with me, someone who didn't make your educational journey easy. In fact, I was probably one of the main people who made it harder for you. And I take ownership of that as a sibling. And I'm glad that we're able to come now and talk about it and hopefully help some, give perspective from the adult side of things. We're adults now, we're not in it, in the thick.
Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Don't be afraid to stand up to yourself, to teachers. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself when you know you're right. Don't be afraid to, just to remember that you deserve to be there. You deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And anyone that steps in that way, just tell them, hey, you don't have right to do this to me. And if they say, I can, do what you got to do. Remember that A, it gets better. B, focus on something you really care about, because raising every one of your abilities up to where other people are isn't going to happen. I'm sorry, it's just not going to be it. Life's not fair. I wish I was born LeBron James height. Okay. I wish I was born as smart as Mark Zuckerberg. We're all the same age. Me, LeBron, Mark Zuckerberg, all the same age. Doesn't matter. Like, you get the cards you're dealt, and lean into your strengths, create a rigid, disciplined life that you see value in, and you will succeed. At the end of the day, people want people that try. People want people around that work hard. People want to help you. It's putting yourself in a position to be helped and putting yourself in a position to succeed. And my opinion, the best way to do that is to have a rigid structure around yourself that will be rewarding, like soccer was for us, or give you a sense of accomplishment, whether that's art, music, whatever makes you feel good, whatever you really like, jump into it and go full force. Don't be afraid to do something different. And no one knows what they're talking about. Everyone's making it up as they go. All of your teachers, your parents, everyone's trying their best.
That's not something only a non-parent would give that secret away for free.
Right. No,
I'm just kidding. It's a joke.
That is adulthood.
Part of what our organization focuses on and what you just said is that advocacy so we're obviously talking to parents primarily, and being advocates for their children, but obviously as children reach that level of maturity, they are their own advocates as well, and giving them, as parents, equipping them to know, like, you have the power to speak up, and we as parents want you to stand up for yourselves, reaching out to the appropriate person to help correct a problem. And if they don't correct a problem, this is something that, we need to address. And thank you so much for joining us today. I really, appreciate hearing your perspective, as my brother, but also just as an adult who looks back at your experience. That's just, everyone's different, everyone's unique, but we can always learn something from each other's stories. So thank you so much for talking with me, little bro.
Thank you.